Good morning, everyone, and welcome to UCL Leaders 2021 Poland in the Global World. I'm Szymon Olejniczak.
And I'm Łukasz Kaźmierczak.
Today we are joined by the former President of the Republic of Poland, Mr. Aleksander Kwaśniewski, to discuss political implications of the new normal. Good afternoon, Mr. President. It's an honor to have you here.
Good afternoon. I'm also very glad to see you and participants.
We were sorry to discover that earlier this year you tested positive for COVID-19. How are you now?
Well, I'm better, but I have to say that it's very unpleasant, very dangerous and strange disease because, first of all, in this very serious period of COVID, I had a very high fever and a lot of problems. But after the fever, the problem is not finished because, frankly speaking, nobody knows what kind of consequences individually we can have after COVID. And I think that is unknown story for the next some years because we need researchers, we need more collected information. But generally speaking, if please protect yourself and please accept all these sanitary duties because it's much better to have no COVID and to survive COVID, frankly speaking. That is really dangerous disease.
Thank you, Mr. President, for this remark. I hope that all our participants will stay safe. Let us stay.
I wish you, but be careful because sometimes I see that especially young people, they are sure that you are so strong that COVID is no problem for you. That is a problem, even if you have COVID without symptoms. Because then still you don't know what kind of consequences for your body, for your blood, for your brain, the COVID will leave.
Yes, the long-term consequences of COVID are not known. But Mr. President, let us stay within the topic of coronavirus. Currently, the hottest issue in public debate are vaccinations. As of the end of February, the UK administered roughly 30 vaccine doses per 100 people, the US 20, and the EU only 7. We would like to hear your opinion on global race in immunizing citizens. Was it wise of member states to agree on the EU's joint vaccination program, and what mistakes could have been avoided and what lessons are to be learned?
Well, I tell you, that is very, very complex question, and it's very difficult to answer briefly. First, what is extremely important, and I think it was the best news of the year 2020, that we have vaccines. Because, frankly speaking, it was very difficult to expect that in such short time we can have proved with high quality vaccines from so many research centers. That is fantastic news. By the way, if you would ask me what was the second best information in 2020, I would say the election and victory of Joe Biden. But I understand that we'll discuss this topic a little bit later on. So that's first, good that we have. Secondly, I think European Union has a correct approach to that. So organize deliveries of vaccines, prepare some common project of vaccination, because we are so much connected, and especially when we have even limited movement of people among or inside European Union, this common project and the common program for vaccination is very important. As you know, the devil is in details, so that probably the program, the project, the idea was good, and I accept it. But realization, the fulfillment of that is various. In some countries better, in some countries worse. I think we should continue this program. We should have a good national, well-organized national programs, and we should still have very, very close cooperation between EU countries, because we need this exchange of information, cooperation, because we are one unit. We are working and living together. So, of course, about mistakes we will speak after, if such moment will come, after COVID. And my political prediction is that all governments, not only in Europe but everywhere, will have a lot of problems after COVID to explain to the public opinion that everything was done correctly. Because I think the level of frustration, the level of let's say, sadness, this long time of restrictions, everything will play very, very strongly against acting governments. I'm observing situation in the world, so probably 4 or 5 governments, they can say that they are doing good job. New Zealand, Singapore, maybe South Korea, to some extent Israel, very, very few countries. And mainly in all countries, also in European Union, we have a lot of criticism, a lot of very angry voices against the government. That's one of the political consequences of COVID, in my opinion.
Thank you for such a profound answer for my previous question. As you know, there are several vaccines, and there is Sputnik, there is a Chinese vaccine from Sinopharm, and this Monday, President Duda of Poland expressed interest in purchasing Chinese vaccine while on a call with President Xi of China. Other Eastern European countries, namely Hungary and Slovakia, decided to buy jabs from Russia, and Denmark and Austria are looking to cooperate with Israel on producing vaccines. So two questions arise here. Should the EU put aside politics and purchase shots from Russia or China? And would you call Mr. Xi or Mr. Putin to ask for their vaccines if you are still in office today?
Well, I tell you, first, of course, it's very difficult to separate politics and pandemia and vaccines, etc. But I don't like it. I don't like it because, in my opinion, the main voice in the question of vaccination should be on the side of experts, of specialists of pandemia, medical doctors, etc. We should use all vaccines which are accepted by recognized, famous, prestigious institutions in our countries, in our case, in Europe. And if the vaccines from Russia or China will have such full acceptance, when we will know about everything, how this vaccine works, what kind of consequences we can have, I have nothing against. I can say, okay, so we should have even the choice. It would be great to go to the laboratory to say, please give me this one vaccine or other vaccine, but this is not so easy. So in my opinion, generally speaking, if I will have proved information about these Chinese or Russian vaccines, I have nothing against to see these vaccines in my country. If that is the politics, to show that I'm not very happy with European Union, I don't like European Union to some extent, like Orban can say, that is of course politics, and I'm very much against such politics. Because in this moment of pandemia, in this time, we need really very close cooperation between the European Union countries, and we need stronger European Union and not weaker. And to use pandemia as a next element or next argument for so-called Eurosceptics, that is, my opinion, wrong. That is not only dangerous, that is stupid, frankly speaking. Because we need today, what I underline again, more cooperation, close cooperation. And I think all this, let's say, skeptical moves from Hungary or Slovakia, or I think they are very, very counterproductive.
Apart from the vaccination program, the EU struggles with rising populism and growing distrust. Moreover, as of today, United Europe faces a solidarity crisis. Nord Stream 2 will be completed later this year, even though it encountered severe opposition from some EU member states, including Poland, and both Trump and Biden administrations. On the other hand, there are countries, most notably Austria, which are devoted supporters of the pipeline. Mr. President, keeping in mind the lack of solidarity in regard to both vaccinations and energy, is there any future for the common foreign and security policy of the European Union?
Well, should be. I think this future should exist, and I hope it will so happen. But of course, you mentioned two different points. I think what concerns vaccination, that is a problem, but with some, even few EU countries. So that is not so serious. When I see the reaction of the majority of European countries, I think we understand this great necessity of cooperation and common politics in European Union. Nord Stream 2 is a complicated issue. I was president when we discussed, or even not discussed, because it was to some extent a surprise prepared by Chancellor Schroeder. It was a time of Nord Stream 1. And I tell you, I had a very, very close relationships with Schroeder, very friendly, I can say. And he was extremely helpful for us in our last stage of negotiations of EU membership, on EU membership. And I was very, very unpleasantly surprised when Schroeder never told me about this project of Nord Stream 1. He kept it as a secret. I can understand why, but it was not nice. It was even unfair, but it happened. Of course, and Nord Stream 2 is to some extent the consequence of this decision of Nord Stream 1. And we have such situation, speaking, for example, with Germans, because they are such driving force of Nord Streams. I remember my talks that, of course, for energetic security for Europe, and especially for Central Europe, this is very, very dangerous, because it can eliminate us from this common market of deliveries of supplies of gas between Russia and Europe. Of course, the Russian argument was not very stupid as well, because they told us, and they told other European countries, we have nothing against if you will buy gas not only from Russia, but you will gas from Gulf countries. You will now buy gas from the shale gas from the United States. That is your decision. Why you are against our decision about, and those time we spoke about the diversification of supplies of gas for our security. Russia used the argument, well, you speak about diversification of suppliers, we can speak about diversification of transit roads. And for us, Nord Stream 1 and 2, that is some kind of diversification. So on such, let's say, practical level of discussion, that is not so easy. But frankly speaking, I'm disappointed. I'm very disappointed because of this decision of Germany. I know why Merkel decided to accept it, because she was under unbelievable pressure from the business circles of Germany. Many companies, they want to have this pipeline. They will earn a lot of money, etc. But of course, Nord Stream 2 and this energetic, let's say, or sector of energy in European Union, that's a huge problem with a huge question mark about our solidarity. And that is not good what happened. But you asked me about the future. And speaking about the future, I want to stay optimistic and to say that if, of course, all these dramas like pandemia will be close to the end, we have to start to discuss in the European Union the question how we imagine the place, the position of European Union in the world, let's say after pandemia world, the world of the third, fourth, and fifth decade of 21st century. And in my opinion, the only answer on such question is that we should be united. We should show much more solidarity, and European Union must have, I underline, must have common policies. Energy is one, climate is second. Security means the fight against all kinds of terrorism, cyber terrorism, etc. Next, health. After pandemic, I think the problem of common politics to fight against next pandemias or such challenges will be necessary. And last point, which in my opinion should be connected with such common European policy, are relationships between Europe, EU, and main partners in the world: China, United States, Russia, and probably UK. Yes, that's a compliment from my side to UK. No, but and in these three issues, I think we need more than even we can imagine today our common policies, solidarity. It doesn't mean that we'll have not different approaches, but diplomacy, politics, that is the art how to find between different approaches some common position, something what we can realize together.
Thank you, Mr. President. You mentioned Angela Merkel. Later this year, she will no longer be the Chancellor of Germany. What do you think will the end of the Merkel era bring to the table? What will happen?
Well, that is a question to the prophets, maybe not to me, but I tell you first. Angela Merkel is and is a great politician, and she conducted German problems, in my opinion, with a lot of successes. And she was extremely important person inside European Union. Why? Because Germany will play the role in European Union with Merkel, without Merkel, before Merkel, after Merkel. That is, Germany is too big. That is great economy. That is geographically located country, really in the center of Europe. So I have no doubts that with new Chancellor, Germany will play own role, important role in European Union. But the difference between Merkel and even Schroeder, what I mentioned before, maybe not so much Kohl and Brandt earlier, but that is a long time ago, but especially in the last years, that Merkel was very much tried to be strong, and she was strong in European politics, but in the same time she was enough modest. She understands very well all these sensitivities among European countries. She tried to be a little bit in the shadow, but everybody knew that her role is really extremely influential. So I think that is good example for the successors of Merkel. That Germany, because of the power, will play the role. But because of many things, including history as well, this role should be very much under control, should be much more, let's say, limited, and with understanding of all these differences and sensitivities which are so strong in Europe. So that is what I would like to say about Merkel. What after Merkel? We'll see. I think Germany will play the role. I think this time after Merkel and after Brexit will be the time for France, and we've observed in the last year such attempts to play stronger role as before. Of course, a lot depends of presidential campaign in France, whether Mr. Macron will be re-elected or not. I hope he will be re-elected. But in any case, for Europe, this period after Merkel, especially the first 1-2 years after end of Merkel era, can be quite complicated, because we can observe, or we will observe some kind of lack of this German leadership, such well defined German leadership.
Thank you for this answer, Mr. President. Let us stay within the realm of leadership of the EU. Poland used to be a champion of the European Union. Thanks to this attitude, Poles were elected for such distinguished position as the President of the European Council or the President of the European Parliament. However, since 2015, what we observe is rather a setback for Poland's position within the European community. Is it possible for Poland to regain its position as a champion of the EU? And what can be done to get back to our plea law and justice position? And what's the future role of Poland in the EU?
For me, that is a very painful question, because really we had, I hope that still we have a chance to be one of the European leaders. I named even such position of Poland, that Poland should be in this enlarged European Union, new European engine, which is working together with this old European engines like Germany and France. And we were on a very good way, because first years of our membership since 2004, that's a success story. That's a success story in sense of economy, of financing from European Union some projects in Poland, and also politically it was a success story, because I think the peak of support for EU in Poland was something around 85 or 87% of the population. This is unbelievable. I think one of the highest support rates in Europe. And unfortunately, together with Law and Justice, Peace party governments, the situation changed. Why? First, because the voters of peace and especially the politicians of peace, they are really Eurosceptical. Secondly, because this ideological project of peace, combination of Polish traditional Catholicism with conservatism, with some elements of nationalism, of course, cannot be in favor of such structures as European Union, and especially superiority of European law over Polish law. That is obvious. Politically and cynically, the leader of peace of Law and Justice Party, Kaczyński, during his very, very long political career, it's more than 30 years here, he collected all these disappointed, frustrated voters together, and that is strong and stable support for his party, in my opinion, the level over 25%, this core group. And of course, one of the arguments to collect these people was to say, no, you have in bad situation, but we know why, because one of the reasons of your bad situation is European Union and international corporations and European banks, etc. And of course, this narrative is easy to accept, and these voters accept it, and that is why this Euroscepticism of Law and Justice is important to keep this base of voters. But you know, in democracy, and I'm sure that Poland will stay democracy, even with some against some ideas which government has. So I think Poland and Polish democracy will survive, and each party, even after a very long time in the government, will lose the election. And I hope, I think this next new parliamentary election in Poland is coming in 3 years, so we can change the situation. And then, of course, Poland should return on this position of pro-European countries with good understanding about European or challenges in front of Europe, and we should have, after peace, we should have much pro-European government. But what is a real problem? The real problem is that the confidence, because for Poland was a lot of confidence, sometimes on credit, in this year of our negotiations between 2004, because Poland was a good example of positive transition reforms. Poland was a good example of developing and strengthening democracy. Poland was a good country of market economy, open economy. Many European companies invested in Poland, and they were very satisfied with that. So the confidence of Poland on this European market, let's say, in European politics, was quite high. Unfortunately, today is low. And to rebuild this confidence, that will be the serious problem for next government. And I think it would be very naive to think that if 3 years new government in Poland, pro-European government will come, then everybody say, okay, Poland is on a good track, so everything is fine. No, I think the problem of confidence or lack of confidence and how to rebuild the confidence to Poland and Polish pro-European politics will take time. And that will be one of the main tasks of new, I hope, new government in next years.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think that the lack of confidence is not only an issue in Poland. I think it's rather a worldwide phenomenon. As you know, populism had a period of success during the past decade. Populists took power in Hungary, the United States, and our own country. Next year, the French people will cast their votes in French presidential election, and Marine Le Pen seems to be strong in opinion polls. On the other hand, last November, Joe Biden defeated Donald Trump, the ultimate populist, in the American presidential race. So what will the new normal mean for populists? Will it bring the end of this ideology or provide even more fuel for it?
Well, I tell you, when I was asked if the success of Biden means an end of populism, I said no, because of course that is a fantastic change, and that is what I mentioned, one of the best two news in 2020. Because let's close your eyes and let's imagine for a second next 4 years of Donald Trump. And I think that you will immediately open the eyes, because to see such nightmare, that's would be unbelievable. So, but to understand the phenomenon of populism, it's necessary to understand why it happened. Why we have this wave of populism in so many countries. That is not only Polish or Hungarian or French phenomenon. You can find populist parties everywhere. Some of these parties with quite strong support. I think to understand, of course, that is good topic for a long lecture. And if you will invite me next time and give me this long time for the lecture, I can prepare it. But very, very briefly, I can say that the populism had some strong roots. The first is this technological change, which we can observe last, let's say, 30, 40 years. The world changed not only very much, but rapidly. And sometimes not the change is a problem for the people, but the pace of all these changes. They cannot adopt so quick in this new situation. And this, and of course, using all this internet, new technologies, etc., we have these people who are included, and we have more and more people not. Of course, they also are using all these instruments, all these devices, but the feeling, the psychological feeling is that we are excluded. That is not for us. This is too much for us. We cannot understand all these new ideas, new changes, etc. That's very, very wide point, but briefly speaking, that is first reason. The second, what is necessary to remember, in the years to 2008-9, we had a very deep financial crisis in the world. And the consequence of this crisis still exists. Maybe I could compare even this crisis, financial crisis 8-9 to the COVID. So to say 1 year after the crisis that the problem is solved was the big mistake. We have the consequence like very high inequality, the decrease of the position of middle class, unemployment, and especially unemployment among young people. In some countries, still, this is a problem on the level of 20%, even more. And that is extremely dangerous, because these young people, they are probably one of the best educated generations in the history of the mankind. After 1-2 universities, they have some diplomas on the walls, and it doesn't mean nothing. So it creates the next group of these frustrated people, very happy to listen all these populists with very, very simple explanations, argumentations, or proposals. The third point is, of course, migration. So migration changed the world very much, and of course we don't understand, or even we don't remember. We don't want to remember that migration exists from the beginning of the world. This is nothing new. But of course, the scale of migration in the last years, the possibility of transfer of the people, etc., created the next such huge fear that, oh, the migrants will come to us, we have no chances, Islam will eliminate our religion, etc., etc. And of course, for many people, that is very, very strong argument that is necessary to build walls to stop migration. And Trump is a good example how he used these fears of many Americans. So I think, and then of course, what is necessary to say with enough self-criticism, we speak about these general phenomena during the time when democracy is in crisis. Traditional democracy, liberal democracy is in crisis. Some political methods which were absolutely effective 50 years ago, even 20 years ago, political parties, some kind of political communication, political debates, today they don't work. We have a new era. We have an era of social media. We have the era when the language of politics should be very, very, how to say, strong, not many words, but well, Twitter language, let's say. That is, again, Trump is a good example how to use Twitter to make the politics. So all these elements created space for populism. And because all these elements will exist next years or even decades, we cannot say the populism is over, the populism is finished. No. I think if the leaders of democratic countries will propose good politics, that we can have a chance to take some voters which are ready today to vote for populists on our side. But that is not easy, because it means that we have a good political programs, we have to change our language of the communication with the voters, and third, we should have good politicians with the credibility. Because the next problem of contemporary world is that we have a lot of specialists of PR, we have a lot of celebrities which wants to be politicians, and we have not so many serious, responsible, credible politicians. And I think that is also the next problem of the democracy today. I tell you when, sorry for such, by the way, remark, but when we discuss enlargement in the years, let's say, during my presidency, 95, 2005, I tell you, it was fantastic to work with the people with such visions, with such determination, with such absolutely optimism. Optimism was also a very important character of the situation. Like in America, Clinton, Tony Blair in UK, Kohl in Germany, Göran Persson in Sweden. So I can name many of great Balkenende in Holland, Verhofstadt in Belgium. So it was a really fantastic generation of very, very strong, charismatic politicians, but very responsible, visionary as well, and with this necessary element of optimism. Because if in politics we have no optimism, we have no chances at all.
An obvious question which comes to mind after this is whether you see any leaders, any politicians that can save the aforementioned liberal democracy nowadays, maybe in Poland or in Europe or anywhere in the world.
Oh, it would be not very wise from my side to say that we have not such politicians. Of course we have, I think everywhere. But frankly speaking, the problem is with the leaders, the politicians on the first line. Because please understand me correctly, but if I remember very good the speeches and conversation with Tony Blair. And really, Tony was, we are more or less the same age. He's one year older. And when he speaks about democracy, when he speaks about Europe, when he speaks about transatlantic ties, I believe that is everything true, so that is not a political game, that is something what is his, not only opinion, but creates his understanding of the world. With Boris Johnson, I have some problem, frankly speaking. I have still some hopes connected with Macron. But France is a very difficult country. that is different case. I think even in such complicated and very divided countries like Italy, when I was very much afraid, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the rising star of Italian politics was Salvini. And Salvini is, in my opinion, even more dangerous as Orban. But look what happened last days. The situation of pandemic and the situation when it's necessary to save Italian economy, etc. The majority of this very, very divided parliament decided to support the government of probably the best and most famous technocrat who lives in Italy, Mario Draghi, who was fantastic president of European Bank during the crisis, financial crisis. And I think this person is probably the best for, I don't know, next 1, 2, 3 years to make an order and to support this liberal democracy in Italy and in Europe. We have very interesting socialist prime minister in Spain, but again, his situation is extremely complicated politically, economically, with Catalan country, etc. So we have such person, but we have not enough on this first line. I would be much more in optimism if, for example, among 27 leaders of EU member countries, we would have at least 10, 12, or 15 strong politicians understanding in this, in such sense, democracy, market economy, Europe, transatlantic ties, social support, fight against inequilibrium, etc., etc. So in Poland, you ask me, well, I think at least we have two interesting politicians, and I see some future in front of them. That is Mayor of Warsaw, almost the president of Poland, Rafał Trzaskowski. I think he has, he's well educated and he has a lot of capacity to be such leader. And the second, which is much more question mark or surprise, is Szymon Hołownia, who decided to create own movement after presidential election, and today this movement has support on the level of something around 20%. But his open page, let's say. We don't know what kind of politics he will make when he will have a chance to do. I think we can find good person on left side as well. It's close to my heart, social democrats, leftists. And what I want to tell you, and you have to observe it carefully, I think the role of women in the politics will increase strongly in coming months and years. And I tell you that the quality of this women politicians is really high in Poland as well. So I think the next wave can be more and stronger and more visible position of women in the politics everywhere, but here in Central Europe even more. Yeah.
So thank you, Mr. President, for your answers. I'm sure our attendees will find your insights most interesting, but I would like to ask you one final question. It will be a lighter one, and all would-be journalists would ask you this question. Imagine we are now in 2023 when Poles will cast their votes in presidential and in parliamentary and local elections. Is the opposition united? And if so, who is the leader? And is the United Right still united, or has there been any disagreement with the agreement party so that snap election are possible?
Oh, I tell you, I think we have a good chance, and that is my prophecy on 50%, that we'll have election in constitutional time, means 2023. So it means that ruling coalition will survive, and will survive not because it's not divided, or is so united. It's not true. They are more and more divided, and I think they don't like each other, etc. But they created the state with such net of common interests, finances, money, positions, etc., that they will not resign so easily and decide to organize some earlier election. I see one scenario for earlier election if the economic situation will be really worsening very much in coming months, especially on the end of this year and beginning of next year, because of COVID, because of budget deficit, because of recession in Europe, etc. And then, of course, this government can have such idea to escape forward, to say, okay, we will not wait for the deepest recession or for very bad economic situation, we will organize election earlier. That can be. I'm not so sure, but that can be. What concerns opposition, I tell you, of course, is not united. But what is good and what give me some hope, they started to discuss. They started to organize some platforms of discussion, of exchange of opinion, because in my opinion, still is not sure what would be better for the opposition during the election, to go together as a one list or to go with 2 or 3 different lists, 2 in my opinion, because center parties together, I will speak in Polish, Platforma Obywatelska, probably Hołownia and PSL as a one group, and these more left parties, SLD, Wiosna, Biedroń and Zandberg, others together. Because I have some doubts if would be possible, even having 3 years to the election, to find some common platform for such different political groups, from the left to the, frankly speaking, center conservatives. Because in Citizen Platform we have quite strong group of conservatives as well. But more important is declaration of these 2 blocks that after the election they will create one together the government. And I think the discussion who can be the prime minister for such government is open. I think we can find the candidates. But what I mentioned before, we have also the possibility, which Italy showed last days, some kind of technocratic government supported by political parties in the parliament. But still, that is a story for next 3 years. And I think we cannot ignore the role of different social movements, which we can see now and will see in coming months. This anti-abortion movement, this is anti-abortion movement organized by women, I think, can play a role. I think the role will play some groups of young people focusing on the question of climate. So the situation can be dynamic, economically difficult, from pandemic point of view also not easy. So that's, in my opinion, government today has much more chances to lose as to win. So for the government, the next days and months are really, can be dramatic.
And with this insightful remark about Polish politics, we come to an end on the keynote speech with President Aleksander Kwaśniewski. Mr. President, it was an honor to have you with us.
Thank you for your questions, and thank you for your attention. All the best.